This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and there has been a growing number of unions around the country, as well as internationally, who've taken up the call of the Palestine General Federation of Trade Unions to boycott Israel and to oppose the attacks on the Palestinians, both in the West Bank, Gaza, and also in Israel, where homes are being taken from Palestinians. And joining us on Work Week with Alex Schmaus, he's a UESF member at Francisco Middle School, and also Soni Lloyd, who's the chapter chair of the UTLA, United Teachers of Los Angeles, and is at Venice High School. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Maybe, Alex, you can talk about your resolution that you passed, why your union took this position. It's a first, I think, for a AFT local in the country, and you've also faced some backlash. So why don't you talk about why your membership decided it was important to pass this resolution and what the resolution is all about?
Yeah, so the Delegates Assembly, the General Delegates Assembly of United Educators of San Francisco passed a resolution in solidarity with the Palestinian people on May 19th. The Delegates Assembly is a body that represents school site union leaders, delegates that are elected from each site by the membership at that site. And it's a body that meets monthly during the school year. And we met on May 19 while the most recent Israeli assault on Gaza was taking place. Like, the bombs were dropping as the General Assembly of UESF was meeting. A group of members, of rank and file members of United Educators San Francisco, we call ourselves San Francisco Movement of Rank and File Educators, decided to bring a resolution to that assembly calling for solidarity with the Palestinian people. It was endorsed by or co-signed by 10 rank and file union members and brought to the assembly. The resolution is the first in the nation by a K-12 teachers union to endorse the call by Palestinian civil society for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. And it also specifically calls for an end to the nearly $4 billion of aid provided by the US federal government to Israel every year. We passed it because we think our union and the labor movement are organizations that fight for social justice, and that's a fight that's global, and it means a fight for justice for Palestinians, just like anyone else.
And we're speaking with Alex Schmaus. And Alex, one of the issues is the situation for education workers in Palestine and the conditions of teachers and students. Did that have some factor in your discussion and debate?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, the call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions is endorsed by the overwhelming majority of Palestine civil society organizations. It's also endorsed by the teachers unions there. So yeah, our fellow teachers in Palestine are calling on us to do this all around the world. The largest teachers union in Europe has answered the call, the National Teachers Union, it's especially important that we in the United States begin to answer this call because of the support that the government here provides to apartheid occupation and ethnic cleansing perpetrated by Israel. It's also the case that the majority of people, or disproportionately people in Gaza, are children. So it's not just that our friends and comrades from around the world are calling on us to do this, but we also felt, as educators of children, a responsibility to the children of Palestine, and especially in Gaza, that we're facing such incredible violence as our delegates assembly was meeting.
And these children who were killed, many of them, young, very, very young, In fact, even the New York Times had, for the first time, the picture of the children who've been killed by by the Israeli jets and bombings. So I think that in the United States, that is coming home to more people, more and more people, that this is really affecting the children and young people in Palestine and Gaza. Also joining us is Soni Lloyd. Soni, you also have been supporting a resolution. Why don't you talk about your action in Los Angeles with the UTLA and what's happened there and why you've taken the action you have?
Okay, yes. We had a similar vote on May 19th in the midst of the bombings. And we different structure, right? We have our House of Reps that meets once a month, but before that, we have area meetings where LA is so big. I think our union's broken up in like 8 different areas of the city. So we have area meetings and where resolutions are passed, the business is discussed. And so this motion was brought in many different areas of the city. And let's see, it was brought in, North area, Harbor, and South Los Angeles, where it was passed. And then in the West area, it was introduced and it wasn't passed. Which is interesting because the West area demographically is different than it's more upscale than other neighborhoods in LA. So it passed in 3 different areas. So that's each area is like a small city in and of itself. And now that the motion will move into the House of Reps, which we won't have our House of Reps meeting until September. And so this is a focus of a lot of discussion. What is UTLA going to do? Is the House of Reps going to pass this motion and make it policy? But it's very similar, calling on Israel to end the bombardment, calling on stop of U.S. aid to Israel, and boycott, divest, and sanction Israel as well. So very similar. I wasn't the author of the motion, but I definitely understand that we do have to take an anti-imperialist stand as a union. We have to challenge that imperialist shell that we live in at all times. Otherwise, we'll just be back to square one, fighting for scraps from the billionaires. And so our unions really are a lever for the working class to flip this society. And we have a responsibility to speak for the working class, not only here, but around the world. So yeah, that's where the motion is at, and there is a lot of pushback. I'm sure you're going to ask about that, but there's a large Jewish community in Los Angeles that is definitely organizing against the motion. They want UTLA to retract the motion. The makers of the motion are being pressured internally in UTLA to retract and stop its progress. But there's enough of us that say no, we want to see this through and bring it to the entire to the rank and file of the entire city. So yeah, there's those dynamics going on too. But we can get into that later, I suppose.
Okay, that's Soni Lloyd. He's the Venice High School chapter chair of UTLA. And of course, the AFT and the NEA have supported Israel. What do you think, both of you, about this idea of a 2-state solution, for example, 1 state for Jews and 1 state for Palestinians? Does that have anything to do with your idea that you can have separate but equal states in that region?
I think it's important to point out that the movement for the Palestinian-led movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against apartheid Israel is not a political organization. It's a movement that does not support any specific political resolution to the problem of Zionist settler colonialism. So the Palestinian-led movement for boycott and divestment and sanctions does not support a 2-state solution. It does not support a 1-state solution or a no-state solution. The only aims of the movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions are three. The right of return for all displaced Palestinians to return to their homes, an end to the illegal occupation that began in 1967, and equal protection under the law for everyone. Those are the goals of the movement for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. So I think it's important to put that out there. Personally, I think that the resolution to the crisis politically has to mean one state with equal rights for everyone. That's my personal position. It's not a position that UESF took when it endorsed boycott, divestment, and sanctions. That's not a position that the movement takes.
And of course, the AFT nationally, Randy Weingarten, and the NEA have supported Israel, and the AFL-CIO, which the AFT is part of, is supporting Israel. In fact, there hasn't been any statement at all from any of the national leaderships of the AFL-CIO, not just the AFT, AFSME, CWA, well, actually, CWA, my union, the newspaper guild, has protested the bombing, but there's been great silence on the part of the labor movement around the attacks on Palestinians. One of the issues is the accusation by Jewish community organizations and in both the Bay Area and Los Angeles that this is anti-Semitic, and that those people behind it are anti-Semitic. Can both of you address that? Because it is a charge that is being leveled at people who are critical of Israel, not just in the United States, but internationally.
Well, first of all, about the two-state solution, I'm for an anti-imperialist solution, however that looks. And it's, yeah, if we're two unequal states, it's not going to work. And there are people in our union that are now saying, okay, we do need to, if we're going to speak on it, we do need to propose a resolution. And as far as the charge of anti-Semitism, from what I've heard, okay, we're only criticizing Israel, right? So that's anti-Semitic, but that's not true. We have a human rights committee in UTLA. We've weighed in on a lot of international human rights violations throughout the year. Second of all, it's not about the Jewish people. It's about the government. It's about our government, the US government and the Israeli government, and really the crimes that they're committing against the Palestinian people. So to equate, this with anti-Semitism is just it's a ruse, right? It's to quash dissent. It's to say, shut up, don't talk about this, because you're a racist somehow, right? But I just think it's an argument. It's a real simple bullying argument, and I think people are done being bullied over this topic of imperialism, and we're going to stand up against it, come what may.
And one of the issues, and I know that the longshoremen have taken an action to support a picket line in Oakland against a Zim ship, an Israeli ship. And one of the things that the union leadership said, and some of the union members, was that they themselves have treated like second-class citizens in this country, blacks, the murders, the attacks on black and brown people in this country. So there's a connection between the treatment of Palestinians and how blacks are treated in the United States. Do you see any comparison, Soni?
Absolutely. It's, imperialism destroys everything in its path. The people of color around the world have been crushed by European colonization, territorial expansion, and its justification. And there's definitely a parallel. Israel was created in the midst of European colonization and imperialism. You can't remove that context from the situation. And so there was a lot of racial theories made about whites and Arabs and blacks and whites and non-whites around that time. And even well before that, right? It was all, justified. A lot of white supremacy came about during colonization, and it seeped into this whole establishment of Israel. And so, yeah, it's definitely similar. And I would say this, that our union UTLA takes a big stance with BLM. We do that. Gosh, they're in our building all the time. We're doing joint things with them all the time. But when it comes to Israel, Palestine, our unions, like, we have no position. I'm a rank and file. I'm just here. I'm not here to speak for UTLA. I'm here to speak for the teachers in UTLA that are anti-imperialist. But definitely, Black Lives Matter, and Palestinian Lives Matter, right? PLM and BLM, it's the same cause we're fighting.
Okay, and that's Sonny Lloyd with the UTLA chapter chair of Venice High. And Alex, your local had a division and a debate inside the local, which you wrote an article about, which we can add the link to on this thing. What was that debate all about? How did that happen, and where is it at now?
Mm-hmm. Well, often, especially in the United States, whenever there is an attempt to stand up for Palestine, our movement faces what are reflexive and bad faith charges of anti-Semitism. And we definitely faced those charges when we moved our resolution at the UESF General Assembly. It was important to make clear from the outset that we actually agree that anti-Semitism is a real danger that the labor movement must oppose. Where we disagree is in why that's relevant to a discussion about standing up for Palestine. Because for one, United Educators of San Francisco and the labor movement more generally actually has a long, proud history of standing up against anti-Semitism. And so we not only are the people that stand up for Palestine not anti-Semitic, the labor movement itself is not anti-Semitic, and that we have no reason to be defensive about that. Anti-Semitism is a real danger, and we're on the side of those that oppose it. In fact, members of United Educators of San Francisco, including myself, mobilized out in the streets multiple times in the last few years in San Francisco and elsewhere in the Bay Area to oppose neo-Nazis and far-right anti-Semitics when they tried to mobilize on our streets. So it was important to say that we think it's also important to fight anti-Semitism. For one, I think it was also important to make the argument that this is an issue that actually is very relevant to our work as educators. Not only are unions social justice organizations that should fight for justice everywhere, the issue of money to Israel is an issue of money that is not going to fund education in this country. Nearly $4 billion that go to Israel every year to fund apartheid occupation and ethnic cleansing could be spent to make sure our classrooms are safe as we get ready for school buildings to reopen up in the fall. We could use that money to pay for modern ventilation systems for our school buildings so the air that our students breathe is safe. We had to make those kinds of arguments. It ended up being that there were only a few speakers at the Delegates Assembly that spoke against the resolution. The vast majority of speakers made arguments in favor of the resolution in solidarity with the Palestinian people. But it was important to get our arguments out there.
And of course, the teachers are being attacked and scapegoated, blamed for not going back to the classes. And Trump and others have said that the teachers should go back into the classrooms. That is an issue in the teachers union. the treatment of teachers and the treatment of students, and also the lack of funding in California, the richest state in the United States, with 117 billionaires, yet it's 46th in funding for education. And we have a budget, a $750 billion budget, and they want to give $750 million more to Israel in armament. Even Bernie Sanders is supporting that. So it seems the priority for public education, students, teachers, is also in question in relationship to where the priorities are in this country for funding of public education. Is that an issue and concern? Soni?
I mean, yeah, it definitely is. I mean, it's like I said, imperialism destroys the working class, right? We look at our federal budget is, well over 50% goes to the military year after year. With a fraction of our military budget, we could solve, world hunger, and not to mention education, first-rate education facilities for everybody, right? So, yeah, this Israel is just it's a part of the imperialist system. It is taking a lot of money, but the 3 billion versus the 700 billion we spend on defense plus nuclear weapons, right? It's a fraction of that, but it all needs to, most of it needs to go back to the people, and these brutal occupations around the world that are the root cause of all of the unrest, right? You have imperialism and you have resistance to that, and that's the world is kind of split into two different camps right now. And as long as you have oppression, there is going to be resistance. And I'll mention, 12 Israelis have died, right, during the 11-day conflict, 2 children. I would amend our motion actually to recognize the Israelis that have died, because they're victims too of this imperialism. Those Israeli children did not deserve to die, but for the actions of their government that are putting them in harm's way, that's why you have the rebellion. That's why you have the rockets, right? You got to put that in context. So we left out, we didn't have the rockets in our resolution, the rockets from Gaza, right, from Hamas, right? So that was seen as anti-Semitic, not talk about the rockets. But if you put that in context, it's just you end the occupation, there will be no rockets flying over and killing innocent Israeli people. And then we fund the Iron Dome, right? So they have protection for their people, and Palestinians have no protection for theirs. It's just a completely one-sided affair.
And are you planning to take this nationally to the AFT convention and the NEA convention if your resolutions pass? Or, I mean, they've already passed at UESF. Is that going to be an issue at the convention?
We're starting to talk to other educators nationally. I know that there's a discussion in the Chicago Teachers Union about taking a position in solidarity with Palestine. I'm watching what Soni is doing and the other comrades in UTLA very closely. I think that we should be having more conversations as educator union activists and as the labor movement more generally about trying to find ways to take this nationally. But I would say that especially UESF and UTLA and other locals that are locals of the American Federation of Teachers, we have, I think, a special responsibility to figure out how to have the conversations to take our movement for solidarity with Palestine and in favor of boycott, divestment, and sanctions against apartheid Israel to a national level, because our union in particular, the American Federation of Teachers, led by Brandy Weingarten, has gone out of its way to be especially supportive of apartheid and ethnic cleansing in Israel. And in fact, the American Federation of Teachers has invested $200 million in bonds with the state of Israel.
Wow. So your own pension money is going to defend the Israeli state and its policies of
Yeah,
discrimination.
we got to take our money out of there and put it somewhere else.
And last, I mean, the issue of teachers in Palestine, are you going to be developing links with teachers and in Palestine so you can get their stories directly to the rank and file about the conditions they face for education? I mean, how can you have education when your schools are bombed, when your hospitals are bombed, when there's a blockade of equipment and everything going into Gaza? It seems like the ability to even have an education is really threatened with these kind of military attacks on Gaza and the people in West Bank.
That's definitely an aspiration. We have we made contact with leaders of the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement in Palestine when we passed our resolution, and in fact, it was covered by news organizations associated with the PLO, which I was happy to see. And was greeted, our resolution was greeted with celebration. But yeah, I think that's definitely an aspiration to develop closer links, not only because of the great need for solidarity of educators and students in Palestine, but also because they can help, those links can help make us stronger, our fight to support them. I think one of the aspirations that I have is that we can work to do more targeted political education about the problem of Zionist settler colonialism in Palestine, targeting union members and targeting educators here in the United States in collaboration with students and educators in Palestine. That's definitely an aspiration that I have.
And also the rise of fascism. Are you surprised, Soni, that the leaders of Israel love Trump and agree with his ideas, and also supported South Africa? They supported the apartheid regime in South Africa.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they love Biden too. Biden's saying the same thing. Israel has the right to defend itself. It's the imperialist, the colonizer has a right to defend itself. That's basically what he's saying. So yeah, we've fascism is a thread that ties both of our parties together, and a lot of Americans together too. Like I said, we're split we're splitting into two camps. You have the fascist and the anti-fascist in the United States, and this is this resolution. That's what it's all about, right? And it has it divided on union? No, it's bringing out who's who, right? Who's on which side, who's standing with the oppressed and who's standing with the oppressor, and that will inevitably, that'll work itself out one way or the other, right? But Alex and I and the rest of the teachers, we're not going to back down. The masses are marching with Palestine, and justice will be had. Hopefully sooner than later, but we know we'll have to bring it in. So
that's right.
Yeah,
Soni.
Fascism is there, but so is the anti-fascists are right here too. And we're ready.
Okay, well, I want to thank both of you for joining us. We've been talking with Alex Schmaus. He's with the UES Francisco Middle School, and Soni Lloyd, who is with UTLA's chapter chair of Venice High. Thanks for joining us on our program today.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.